Welcome to this quiet journey through the hidden world of Skyrim. If you are enjoying these explorations, make sure to subscribe so you never miss the next discovery. Skyrim is not only about dragons and battles, it is a land scattered with secrets that reward the patient and the curious. In the forests, on mountain peaks, and deep below the ground, stories are written in silence, waiting to be uncovered. One of the strangest discoveries sits high above the cliffs, where a lone goat perches on a narrow ledge, completely out of reach. It is a reminder that Skyrim's wildlife often defies logic, and perhaps even the developers joined in the joke. In Blackreach, among glowing mushrooms and silent Dwemer machines, the remains of a miner lie crushed beneath a pile of ore. His story is clear without words. He dug too greedily and too deep, and the stone itself became his grave. Near Whiterun, an overturned wagon has spilled nothing but cabbages across the ground, a quiet nod to the series' long tradition of absurd accidents. Some of Skyrim's secrets are darker. In the icy swamps, you can find a skeleton bound to a tree by rough rope, a haunting image of cruelty with no explanation. On the road at night, a spectral horseman can appear and vanish into the shadows, guiding only the most persistent travelers toward an ancient graveyard. And hidden in a ruined cabin, shelves stacked with dozens of mugs tell of someone's strange obsession, transforming an ordinary room into a silent joke about hoarding. Even in the smallest corners, Skyrim turns ordinary objects into tiny stories. A skeleton slumped in front of a locked chest with broken lockpicks scattered at its side becomes a mirror of every adventurer's frustration. Another lies with a fishing rod in hand, frozen in the ice, forever caught in a last attempt at survival. These details are not quests, not rewards, but gifts for explorers, proof that the land of Skyrim is alive with humor, tragedy, and mystery. In Skyrim, the smallest details often tell the richest stories. A wanderer stepping off the road may stumble upon a skeleton sprawled beside a chest, its hand reaching out as though treasure had been inches away. There is no quest tied to this moment, no reward waiting inside. It is simply a cruel little tale of ambition cut short, a reminder that greed can be its own undoing. In another corner of the wilderness, a giant's camp hides an odd shrine, a massive mammoth skull crowned not with horns, but with a wheel of cheese balanced on top. The absurd sight feels like a joke left for players who know Sheogorath's influence, a surreal mix of worship and humor. Not far away, a lone skeleton lounges in a chair with a mug at its side, posed as though it had decided to keep drinking even after death. The scene is equal parts eerie and funny, a snapshot of Skyrim's quiet absurdity. Other discoveries lean toward tragedy. In the icy tundra, you may find a fisherman frozen in the act of casting a line, his rod still clenched as the water claimed him. Deeper in the caves, skeletons lie gathered around a table, dice and parchment scattered as though they were caught mid-game, eternal players frozen in their final session. And in certain Dwemer ruins, faint metallic echoes drift through the halls, sounding almost like voices. There is no one there, only the suggestion that machines or ghosts still haunt the silence. Even the landscape itself seems to conspire in these stories. A collapsed wall of ice traps a miner, his pickaxe still in hand, crushed by the very element he tried to master. A circle of bones lit by candles in a swamp near Morthal raises questions that will never be answered. A ritual frozen in time. These details are not marked on maps, yet they turn exploration into something greater than loot. They transform Skyrim into a place where every ruin, every swamp, and every mountain holds secrets that whisper to those who stop long enough to listen. The line between myth and reality in Skyrim is often blurred by the way its secrets appear in the wilderness. In the mountains near the Pale, a figure lies frozen in ice, armor half buried, shield raised in a defensive pose as if the last strike of battle had been paused forever. To stumble upon it feels like discovering a forgotten warrior entombed by nature itself, preserved as though Skyrim wanted the story remembered. Elsewhere, the developers leaned into humor. In a cave south of Falkreath, a skeleton dangles upside down with its sword just beyond its grasp, echoing a familiar scene from cinema where a hero is trapped by a beast in an icy lair. It is a sly nod to pop culture, a wink hidden within Tamriel's frozen caves. In another ruin, a skeleton sprawls across a treasure chest, its hand resting on the lock, while inside lies nothing but broken pottery. The cruel joke is immediate. This adventurer gave their life for junk. Tragedy and comedy often exist side by side. Near Eastmarch, a burnt skeleton sits in the center of a blackened crater, surrounded by scattered mining tools. The placement suggests a sudden eruption, as though the land itself struck back at human greed. Yet the way the body lies, limbs awkwardly stretched, supplies tossed into absurd positions, makes the scene almost slapstick, as if the eruption was both brutal and ridiculous. Even Skyrim's greatest enemies are woven into these environmental stories. In remote valleys, dragon bones rest in unnatural positions, some collapsed among trees as though they fell mid-flight, others tangled with the skeletons of giants, locked in eternal combat with no victor. These silent monuments expand the sense of a world shaped by countless unseen battles. And sometimes, the smallest creatures carry the biggest punchlines. In a cave littered with coins, a skeever stands perched atop the pile like a miniature dragon, defender of riches it could never use. It is a subtle gag, one that most players will rush past, but for those who notice, it becomes a perfect snapshot of Skyrim's humor, an absurd twist hidden within a dangerous land. In Skyrim, some of the most haunting discoveries lie hidden in places where no quest ever leads you. South of Winterhold, I once stumbled upon a skeleton frozen mid-motion, sword still raised, as if caught in battle only to be trapped in ice for centuries. It felt less like scenery and more like a legend buried alive, preserved so perfectly that you can almost imagine the last scream echoing against the mountain. Pop culture slips into Tamriel in strange ways too. In a cavern near Dawnstar, a skeleton hangs upside down from the ceiling, its blade lying just out of reach. The staging mirrors a famous scene from a galaxy far away, where a trapped hero reaches desperately for his weapon in a frozen lair. Skyrim rarely breaks its own tone, but here it smiles knowingly at those who recognize the image. The developers also toy with irony. In one ruin, a body lies sprawled across an ornate chest, its lockpick still in hand. When opened, the chest holds nothing of worth, just broken scraps, proof that death came for nothing. The story is told in silence, a commentary on how fragile fortune can be. There are lighter touches too. East of Falkreath, in a clearing surrounded by hot springs, a burnt skeleton rests inside a blackened crater, mining tools scattered in absurd positions. The tragedy of a sudden eruption is softened by the almost comic sprawl of limbs and supplies, turning catastrophe into a kind of grim slapstick. But not all discoveries are jokes. In the wilds near the Reach, massive dragon bones lie collapsed among shattered trees, their placement suggesting ancient battles fought long before the Dragonborn's story began. Some are tangled with the remains of giants, their bones locked together in an endless struggle. These scenes expand Skyrim's history, showing that its mountains and valleys have always been a battlefield where myths collided long before anyone arrived to witness them, and sometimes the smallest jokes are the most memorable. In a forgotten cave, a skeever sits perched proudly atop a pile of gold coins, as though crowned king of a hoard it cannot possibly use. It is an absurd tableau, hidden in the shadows, waiting for players curious enough to look closer and laugh at the world's twisted sense of humor. Skyrim's brilliance lies in how it transforms even the smallest corners of the world into silent theaters of storytelling. Wandering away from the main roads, players are often rewarded with scenes that mix humor, tragedy, and myth in ways that feel both deliberate and organic. One striking example can be found near a frozen riverbank, where a skeleton sits slumped against a tree with fishing gear scattered around. The placement makes it look as if the poor soul fell victim to the icy waters, a reminder that Skyrim's dangers are not always dragons or bandits, but also the relentless environment itself. This is the kind of detail that transforms ordinary exploration into a discovery of stories never spoken aloud. Even more unusual are the subtle nods to myths that cross from our world into Tamriel's. In a remote glacial cavern, players can stumble upon a skeletal hand frozen into the ice, still clutching the hilt of a sword. The image is haunting, yet unmistakable in its echo of the Arthurian legend of the Lady of the Lake. Skyrim reshapes the myth, turning it from a tale of hope and kingship into a tragic scene of futility, where the sword's promise has been lost to time. By twisting a familiar legend into something darker, the game reminds players that Skyrim is a land where happy endings are never guaranteed. Pop culture winks are woven seamlessly into the game as well. In a snow-choked cave, an adventurer's body is discovered hanging upside down from the ceiling, a sword lying just out of reach. For fans of classic cinema, the scene mirrors Luke Skywalker's capture in the Wampa's cave from The Empire Strikes Back. It's a sly Easter egg that breaks through the fantasy setting to nod at one of science fiction's most iconic moments. These moments create a layered experience where Tamriel is both a self-contained world and a playground for references that extend beyond it. Not all discoveries lean on references, however. Sometimes the humor comes from flipping expectations. In one hidden glade, a single skeever is perched on a pile of gold coins, as if guarding the hoard like a miniature dragon. The absurdity of such a weak creature defending riches it could never use is both comical and strangely fitting. Skyrim constantly toys with the player's sense of scale, showing that even vermin can appear mighty when staged with a touch of developer humor. The game also indulges in environmental irony. Deep within a mine, a skeleton lies crushed under a pile of loose ore, its pickaxe still clenched tightly in its bony hand. The silent story is clear. Greed and determination led to collapse. This kind of placement transforms ordinary debris into a fable, turning exploration into a meditation on ambition's dangers. Similarly, in another ruin, a skeleton sprawled across a pressure plate trap becomes both a warning and a joke. It suggests a would-be adventurer who charged ahead recklessly only to trigger their own doom. Players recognize themselves in these moments, having often made the same mistakes, and the game winks at them through bones arranged like punchlines. Sometimes, the humor grows surreal. Near a cliff overlooking the Sea of Ghosts, one might find a goat perched impossibly on a jagged peak, as though it had scaled the mountain with supernatural grace. It's a playful nod to Skyrim's famously unpredictable animal physics, turning what could be dismissed as a bug into a deliberate-seeming Easter egg. These touches prove that not every hidden moment needs a deep meaning. Sometimes the joke is enough. Other times, the discoveries are meant to unsettle. In a swamp south of Morthal, a crude ritual site lies hidden among the reeds, where bones and candles form a circle around an abandoned altar. No quest explains it, no NPC mentions it, yet its presence stirs unease. It feels like evidence of cult activity, the residue of dark worship. These moments unsettle precisely because they are left unexplained, leaving imagination to fill in the gaps. Skyrim excels at balancing light-hearted humor with hints of horror that lurk in the shadows of its world. The developers also revel in poking fun at the very players exploring their world. In one ruined home, a skeleton lies collapsed in front of a locked chest with several broken lockpicks scattered nearby. The implication is obvious. This unfortunate thief died trying to force the lock. For players who have spent hours breaking their own picks in frustration, the scene feels like a direct joke at their expense. It's an example of Skyrim's playful dialogue with its audience, using the environment itself to laugh along with them. Even Skyrim's most iconic creatures are drawn into the Easter egg tradition. In certain regions, dragon skeletons are posed in unusual ways, as though they had been slain in mid-crash centuries before the Dragonborn story begins. Tangled among trees or sprawled across cliffsides, they suggest a history of battles fought and forgotten. These remnants create the impression that Skyrim is a land where epic conflicts long predate the player, deepening the sense of timelessness. Skyrim's hidden details also reveal a fondness for parody. In one dungeon, players can find a skeleton seated at a table with a cheese wheel in its hand, its head slumped as if its last meal was its most cherished possession. Cheese wheels are a running gag across the Elder Scrolls series, tied to the mad god Sheogorath, and this arrangement feels like a private joke between developers and fans. It's absurd, funny, and strangely endearing, proof that not every story in Skyrim is about glory or tragedy. Sometimes it's just about cheese. All of these moments, tragic, humorous, mythic, and absurd, come together to create a world that constantly rewards curiosity. They ensure that exploration is never empty, that even the smallest cave or ledge might hold a secret worth remembering. Skyrim's Easter eggs do not exist to be catalogued or checked off. They exist to remind players that every step away from the main path could lead to a story no bard will ever sing, but one the player will never forget. One of the most remarkable qualities of Skyrim is the way it creates stories without ever needing dialogue or quest markers. The land itself feels alive, filled with small arrangements that reward patience and attention. Every ruin, cabin, and mountain slope is an opportunity for players to uncover a fragment of narrative, sometimes humorous, sometimes haunting. What makes these Easter eggs unforgettable is how seamlessly they are blended into the environment, waiting for those curious enough to wander off the beaten path. Take, for instance, the skeleton of a miner buried beneath a collapsed shaft. His hand still clutches the pickaxe, his bones pinned beneath the rocks he once sought to profit from. It is an image of irony, treasure buried forever under the weight of ambition. Scenes like this elevate Skyrim's exploration into cautionary tales, teaching players about the dangers of greed without a single line of dialogue. They are miniature fables written in stone and bone. Equally striking are the quiet nods to real-world myths. In a frozen pond near Windhelm, the skeletal arm of a fisherman juts out of the ice, still gripping a fishing pole. The placement suggests that he fell through while trying to catch his meal, a grim parody of survival turned to tragedy. The absurdity of the moment is balanced by its poignancy. Not every story in Skyrim ends with a dragon battle. Sometimes it ends with a man and his rod swallowed by the unforgiving cold. The developers also indulged in more playful humor. In a mountain clearing, a goat can be found balanced precariously on the tip of a jagged boulder, staring out across the tundra like a sentinel. It is a surreal image, both comical and strangely majestic, reminding players of Skyrim's unpredictable animal physics. What might appear at first glance to be a glitch feels instead like a deliberate Easter egg, a joke placed there by the developers for anyone willing to climb high enough to see it. Another example lies within Dwemer ruins, where machines and echoes dominate the atmosphere. In one chamber, a crumpled sphere lies in such a twisted position that it resembles a dead traveler slumped against the wall, cup in hand. It is eerie, yet humorous, as if even the ancient constructs grew weary and decided to rest. These small touches blur the line between the mechanical and the human, making the ruins feel inhabited not just by machines, but by forgotten echoes of lives long gone. Humor often takes darker forms. In one ruin, a skeleton is propped against the wall, its head tilted back with a dagger embedded in its chest. Beside it lies a note filled with bitter ramblings about betrayal. Together, the corpse and the letter create a complete drama, as though the ruins themselves staged a play of love, jealousy, and death for the player to stumble upon. Skyrim does not announce these discoveries. It simply waits for observant explorers to find them and piece together the story. Skyrim also likes to remind players that danger comes from many directions. Near the volcanic tundra, one can find a burnt skeleton surrounded by scattered tools. The charred crater around the body suggests a sudden geothermal eruption, a moment of slapstick tragedy frozen forever. It is humorous in its absurdity, but also haunting in its realism. The message is simple. In Skyrim, even the earth itself can kill you. The developers took special delight in poking fun at players themselves. In a forgotten home, a skeleton lies collapsed in front of a locked chest with broken lockpicks scattered nearby. The implication is that the adventurer died trying to force open the chest. For players who have lost countless picks in frustration, the joke feels sharp and personal, as though the game world is laughing with them. It is one of the many ways Skyrim turns shared frustrations into humor, creating a bond between the developers and their audience. Other times, the humor is almost cartoonish. In the snowy wilds, a wagon overturned, spilling cabbages across the ground. The absurdity of the image echoes a running gag across the Elder Scrolls series, where cabbage carts have become symbols of both humor and chaos. For longtime fans, finding one in Skyrim is like encountering an old friend, a nod to the series' history hidden in plain sight. But humor is not the only gift. Some Easter eggs deliberately unsettle. In a swamp near Morthal, bones and candles form a circle around a crude altar, a silent suggestion of cult activity. No quest directs you there, and no character explains the scene. Its very lack of context makes it more haunting, leaving imagination to fill in the blanks. Skyrim thrives on these unexplained details, letting players write their own interpretations of what they have found. Even beneath the water, secrets lie in wait. In a deep lake, a skeleton is chained to an anchor, forever bound at the bottom. Unlike the frozen fisherman or the drowned warrior seated on a throne, this body tells a story of punishment and cruelty rather than accident. It is not just a corpse, it is evidence of murder, silent but chilling. These aquatic discoveries add an eerie dimension to exploration, making players cautious even of still waters. And then there are nods to the roots of fantasy itself. In a hidden ruin, skeletons are arranged around a table littered with dice and parchment. The tableau is a clear tribute to tabletop role-playing games, the genre that gave birth to Skyrim's own lineage. It is both a joke and a thank you, acknowledging the adventurers of the real world who once rolled dice late into the night, imagining the kinds of journeys that Skyrim now lets players live. All of these small details, comedic goats, tragic miners, broken lockpicks, drowned skeletons, and dice-playing corpses, combine to make Skyrim more than just a game. They turn it into a living chronicle of humor, tragedy, and myth. Exploration becomes less about loot and more about uncovering hidden layers of meaning, each one adding depth to the land. Skyrim is a world of secrets, not shouted from rooftops, but whispered quietly through bones, props, and absurd placements. Every discovery feels like a conversation with the developers, a reminder that Tamriel is as much about curiosity as it is about destiny. One of the qualities that separates Skyrim from countless other open-world games is the way it allows the smallest details to speak volumes. You don't always need a quest marker or a character monologue to understand the story being told. Sometimes a single skeleton, a misplaced object, or a strange arrangement in the wilderness conveys more history than 1,000 words could. This design philosophy transforms Skyrim into a vast tapestry where curiosity is constantly rewarded and every corner holds the potential for discovery. Take, for instance, the recurring theme of adventurers undone by their own ambition. Deep within a mine, you may stumble upon the remains of a prospector sprawled across a pile of ore, their hand still clutching a shattered pickaxe. The tragedy is obvious. The miner dug too deeply, too recklessly, and the very thing they pursued became their grave. It is a warning and a story in one, a silent parable about the thin line between success and ruin. Scenes like this turn Skyrim into a collection of miniature fables carved into the earth itself. Equally striking are the nods to myths that stretch far beyond Tamriel. Near the cold rivers of the Reach, explorers can find a skeletal hand emerging from the water, still grasping the hilt of a sword. It immediately calls to mind the legend of Excalibur and the Lady of the Lake, but in Skyrim's grim version, there is no king and no destiny, only a corpse clinging to a forgotten weapon. It is a darker retelling of a hopeful myth, perfectly in line with Skyrim's harsh tone. Instead of triumph, it offers futility, reminding the player that not every story has a happy ending. The game also balances such tragedy with levity. On a snowy mountain trail, you may encounter a goat standing proudly atop a skeleton as though it had claimed victory in battle. The absurdity of the arrangement transforms a simple animal into a conqueror, poking fun at the unpredictability of Skyrim's physics and the strange power goats seem to hold within the series. It is both a joke and a celebration of the game's quirks, one that players laugh about long after moving on. Dwemer ruins provide some of the richest ground for these discoveries. Among the humming machines and eerie silence, players can find mechanical constructs slumped in bizarre human-like poses. In one ruin, a sphere has collapsed onto a table, its lifeless body positioned as though it had been studying a book. The image is surreal, turning an ancient killing machine into a failed scholar. Another ruin contains a centurion with its massive arms outstretched, frozen mid-collapse as though it had died in agony. These arrangements blur the line between life and machine, giving Dwemer ruins a ghostly atmosphere that lingers long after you leave. Humor is never far from tragedy in Skyrim. In the wilderness near Riften, one can discover a skeleton seated at a table, tankard in hand, its skull slumped into a bowl of stew. The implication is ridiculous. This unlucky soul drank and ate themselves to death. Yet, the placement feels intentional, a developer's wink at the idea of dying happy. It is both grotesque and comedic, a combination Skyrim handles better than most games. Another running theme is greed punished by irony. Countless caves and ruins contain skeletons sprawled in front of treasure chests, arms outstretched as though they died reaching for their prize. Sometimes the chest contains valuable loot, but other times it holds nothing but junk. In both cases, the joke is the same. Ambition can kill as easily as monsters can. These cautionary tales are scattered everywhere, transforming loot into a symbol of folly rather than fortune. Even Skyrim's natural environment seems to join in the storytelling. In one volcanic region, a burnt skeleton lies at the center of a scorched crater, tools scattered around it. The image suggests sudden death by geothermal eruption, a brutal but comical reminder that the land itself is as deadly as its creatures. In another area, a cliffside skeleton clings to a pickaxe, its body dangling just inches from a vein of ore. The scene is tragicomic in its simplicity. The miner was so close, yet fell to their death before they could claim their prize. The developers also enjoy poking fun at the players themselves. Lockpicking, a skill that frustrates many, is mocked through skeletons collapsed in front of locked doors, broken picks scattered around their corpses. It is as if the developers immortalized every failed attempt at cracking open a chest. For anyone who has wasted dozens of picks on a stubborn lock, these moments feel personal. Humor directed squarely at the frustrations of real adventurers. Pop culture references enrich Skyrim's tapestry as well. In a frozen cave, a skeleton hangs upside down from the ceiling with a sword lying just out of reach. An unmistakable nod to the famous scene in The Empire Strikes Back when Luke Skywalker is trapped in the Wampa's lair. Such Easter eggs blur the boundary between Tamriel and our own world, rewarding players who recognize the homage while still fitting naturally into Skyrim's grim atmosphere. Elsewhere, humor takes stranger forms. Cheese wheels, a running joke in Elder Scrolls lore tied to the Daedric Prince Sheogorath, appear in bizarre places. In one ruin, a mountain of cheese fills an entire chamber, with a skeleton buried beneath the pile as though consumed by dairy obsession. It is absurd but unforgettable, a reminder that not all secrets are dark, some are simply ridiculous. There are also moments of pure mystery. In the swamps of Hjalmarch, bones are nailed to trees in grotesque displays, suggesting ritual or cruelty. No quest leads here, no NPC explains the sight. The ambiguity is what makes it powerful, leaving players to invent their own terrifying explanations. Skyrim thrives on this kind of silence, where the absence of answers is more unsettling than any explicit story. Even underwater, secrets abound. A skeleton chained to an anchor at the bottom of a lake suggests murder, not accident. A drowned warrior sitting on a throne beneath the surface hints at forgotten legends. These discoveries transform simple swims into unsettling dives into history. Each one is a reminder that Skyrim's waters are as full of stories as its mountains and ruins. The layering of humor, tragedy, myth, and pop culture creates a world that feels endlessly alive. Every skeleton, every misplaced cheese wheel, every odd goat perched on a rock contributes to the illusion that Tamriel is a land with its own sense of humor and horror. What makes these details so remarkable is not their extravagance, but their subtlety. They are not marked on maps or announced with fanfare. They wait patiently, scattered across the land, to be found only by those who take the time to look closer. This design turns exploration into a treasure hunt of meaning. Each Easter egg is like a whispered conversation between the developers and the player, a private joke or a haunting reminder. Skyrim may be a game of dragons and prophecies, but it is also a game of goats on cliffs, skeletons at dinner tables, and treasure hunters who died inches from their goal. These are the details that keep players returning, year after year, long after the main story is done. One of the most remarkable things about Skyrim is how much life it breathes into forgotten corners. The main quests and guild storylines are full of drama, prophecy, and destiny, but the true soul of the game is often hidden in the margins. When you wander off the marked path and let curiosity lead you, you begin to find stories told not through dialogue or scripted encounters, but through the careful arrangement of bones, props, and silence. It is in these unscripted discoveries that Skyrim feels less like a designed world and more like a living one, filled with histories that continue whether the Dragonborn is there to witness them or not. Consider the caves that lie scattered beneath Skyrim's mountains. In one forgotten grotto you might stumble upon the body of a bandit who has been skewered by his own trap, a spike wall triggered by the pressure plate at his feet. His corpse slumped forward is both a warning and a joke. It tells the player, even the world itself punishes recklessness. In another ruin, a skeleton lies face down on a plate trigger, arrows embedded in the wall behind it. You don't need a quest log to know the story. It is told entirely in the positioning of bones and props. Skyrim excels at this kind of environmental storytelling, where tragedy becomes lesson and lesson becomes humor. Not all discoveries are grim. In the volcanic tundra near Eastmarch, you might come across a burnt skeleton seated in the center of a scorched crater. The scattered tools around it suggest that the victim was a prospector, undone not by monsters but by the land itself. The sight is absurd, a corpse posed almost as if it had been calmly sitting when the earth erupted beneath it. It is slapstick tragedy, a moment that makes you laugh even as it unsettles you. Skyrim constantly walks this fine line, mixing horror with comedy, ensuring that even its darkest secrets retain an element of humanity. The developers also had fun scattering whimsical references to pop culture. In one icy cavern, an adventurer's corpse hangs upside down from the ceiling, with a sword lying just out of reach. To the casual player, it is simply a strange tableau. But for fans of cinema, it's an unmistakable nod to Luke Skywalker trapped in the Wampa's lair in The Empire Strikes Back. The way Skyrim slips such references into its frozen dungeons without ever breaking immersion is part of its genius. These moments blur the line between Tamriel and our own world, rewarding those who recognize the wink. But humor is not confined to nods at other media. It is baked into Skyrim's DNA. Sweet rolls, for example, are more than just food. They are a joke, a continuity gag carried through multiple Elder Scrolls games. Guards endlessly ask about them, players hoard them, and the developers themselves seem obsessed with scattering them in odd places. One overturned wagon in the wilderness contains nothing but sweet rolls spilled across the ground, as if Tamriel itself were in on the joke. Another cave hides a skeleton clutching a sweet roll in its bony hand, as though it had chosen dessert as its final comfort. These absurdities transform pastries into symbols of humor and continuity, threads that tie Skyrim to its predecessors. Dwemer ruins are a playground of their own kind. Beyond the danger of Falmer and mechanical constructs, these places are filled with quiet jokes and unsettling mysteries. In one ruin, a collapsed automaton slumps against a wall with a book on the floor in front of it, looking eerily like a failed student. In another, gears endlessly turn beside the bones of a scholar who perhaps tried to decode their secrets. These tiny scenes turn the ruins into mausoleums of curiosity, places where both machine and man are undone by ambition. The fact that these details exist without any quest connection makes them even more powerful. They are not for everyone. They are for the observant, the wanderers, the players who pause and look. Animals, too, are folded into the tapestry of Easter eggs. In the snowy cliffs near Dawnstar, a goat stands balanced on a precarious ledge, high above where any predator could reach. The placement is so strange that it feels deliberate, as though the developers wanted to celebrate Skyrim's unpredictable physics. Elsewhere, a wolf lies curled beside a skeleton, as if it chose companionship in death. These small arrangements turn ordinary wildlife into silent storytellers, adding warmth, tragedy, and comedy to the frozen land. One of Skyrim's greatest strengths is how it blurs myth with its own lore. In a frozen lake, a skeletal hand rises from beneath the ice clutching a sword, a dark echo of the Lady of the Lake. In another area, bones are arranged in a circle with candles, suggesting cult activity or ritual sacrifice. Neither of these moments are tied to quests. They exist only as whispers, reminders that Tamriel is a place where myths, legends, and horrors coexist without explanation. The ambiguity is what makes them powerful. By refusing to provide answers, Skyrim leaves space for players to create their own stories. Underwater, the secrets continue. A skeleton chained to an anchor rests at the bottom of a river, hinting at execution or betrayal. In Eastmarch, a drowned warrior sits on a throne beneath the water, sword in hand, as though he were once a king of the lake. These haunting discoveries make swimming in Skyrim more than a mechanical action. It becomes an archaeological dive into forgotten tragedies. Even humor turns dark in unexpected ways. In one cave, a cooking pot contains not stew, but bones and troll fat, suggesting that either the occupant dined on monsters, or that monsters dined on them. In another ruin, skeletons are arranged around a table covered in dice, an obvious nod to tabletop role-playing games. Here, the joke is not just about Tamriel, but about us, the players whose love of dice-driven adventures gave birth to Elder Scrolls in the first place. It is a meta-reference woven seamlessly into the environment, a sly acknowledgement of gaming's roots. Perhaps the most absurd Easter eggs are those that revel in chaos. Cheese wheels tumble downstairs, skeletons sit slumped mid-drink centuries after death, and cabbages spill from overturned carts, as though mocking Skyrim's physics engine. These moments are not grand or mythic, but they are unforgettable. They remind players that the world is not only about dragons and destiny, it is also about laughter, glitches, and quiet absurdities. Taken together, these details create a second Skyrim layered beneath the first. The surface is a story of prophecy, war, and the rise of the Dragonborn. But beneath that lies a hidden world of inside jokes, pop culture winks, and silent tragedies. To rush through the main story is to miss the real magic. The thousands of small stories scattered across caves, mountains, and lakes. Skyrim is not alive because of dragons or shouts. It is alive because of goats perched on cliffs, skeletons collapsed at dinner tables, and miners who dug too deeply. Exploration in Skyrim is not about efficiency. It is about wandering, stumbling, noticing. It is about laughing when you find a skeleton crushed under a mammoth, or shivering when you discover a ritual circle of bones. Each Easter egg is a conversation, not shouted but whispered, between the developers and the player. And that is why Skyrim, more than a decade after its release, continues to reward curiosity. Skyrim thrives on its ability to turn even the most ordinary places into something unforgettable. Unlike many games where hidden details are neatly cataloged or presented with fanfare, here the secrets are woven quietly into the fabric of the land. You could walk past a dozen times without noticing them, and that's what makes each discovery feel so personal. When you finally stumble on one of these details, whether it's a skeleton with a story to tell or an object placed with sly humor, it feels less like content you were meant to find, and more like a secret whispered to you alone. That is part of Skyrim's genius, rewarding those who look closer, who stop and notice. In the wilderness outside Whiterun, for example, you may come across a giant's camp where a mammoth skeleton rests half buried in the ground. At first glance, it seems like just another remnant of Skyrim's wildlife, but closer inspection reveals something stranger. The mammoth's body is pinned awkwardly, and beneath it lies the skeleton of a human crushed flat. It's a macabre joke, suggesting that this poor soul wandered too close to a massive beast and paid the ultimate price. The arrangement is both horrifying and absurd, a reminder that in Skyrim, the land itself often tells stories as vivid as any quest. Not far away, another scene tells a different kind of tale. Bandit corpses litter a farmer's field, their bodies scattered among vegetables, while a giant still patrols nearby. The implication is clear. The bandits tried to rob or attack, but the farmer had a silent guardian in the form of the giant. This environmental vignette is one of many that highlight how Skyrim uses its creatures not just as enemies, but as characters in stories you piece together. Giants are often seen as hostile or mysterious, yet here, one becomes an unlikely protector, reminding players that even the most dangerous beings can sometimes shift roles in the tapestry of the world. The game also indulges in humor that pokes fun at adventurers themselves. In several caves, skeletons lie sprawled across treasure chests, their hands inches from the lock. Some chests contain riches, others, nothing but useless trinkets. Either way, the message is the same. Greed can kill, and fortune often comes with folly. These scenes feel like mirrors held up to the player's own behavior, mocking the endless pursuit of loot at all costs. By embedding this humor into the very bones of the world, Skyrim makes exploration feel self-aware, a dialogue between developer and player. Myths and legends are never far away either. In a frozen lake, you might spot a skeletal hand reaching up through the ice, still gripping a sword. The sight echoes the Arthurian myth of Excalibur, yet twisted into something darker and more tragic. Instead of a mystical lady of the lake, you find only death and futility. Skyrim loves to reshape familiar stories into bleaker reflections of its world, blending Tamrielic lore with echoes of our own myths. These reinterpretations add depth, turning simple encounters into layered cultural references. The developers also had fun inserting nods to pop culture. One of the most memorable is found in a snowy cavern where a skeleton dangles upside down, a sword lying just out of reach. Fans of Star Wars immediately recognize the homage to Luke Skywalker's entrapment in the Wampa's cave. The placement is deliberate, but it never feels forced. It works both as a pop culture nod and as a standalone moment of mystery for those unfamiliar with the reference. This duality is what makes Skyrim's Easter eggs so effective. They reward recognition without excluding anyone. Dwemer ruins, with their eerie silence and endless machinery, are fertile ground for such secrets. In one ruin, a collapsed automaton rests against a wall, its limbs twisted in such a way that it looks almost human, like a scholar who died at their desk. In another, a sphere has fallen into a heap beside gears that still grind on, as if the machine gave out mid-task while its work continued endlessly. These details breathe life into the ruins, turning them into haunted museums of ambition and failure. They remind players that the Dwemer were not just mysterious builders, but beings whose arrogance outlasted their existence. Even Skyrim's wildlife becomes part of this grand design. Goats are particularly notorious, often found perched on impossible cliffs or standing proudly in places no creature should logically reach. Their strange behavior feels like a running joke, acknowledged by the developers, an Easter egg born from physics quirks and turned into intentional comedy. Wolves and bears sometimes appear posed in uncanny ways, almost as if arranged deliberately to mimic human behavior. One wolf lies curled beside a skeleton, suggesting companionship in death. These subtle touches turn ordinary encounters into memorable vignettes, layering emotion into the wilderness. Cheese wheels, too, become absurd monuments. In one ruin, a pile of them towers nearly to the ceiling, with a skeleton buried beneath as though consumed by dairy devotion. Elsewhere, they tumble downstairs in a flood of round absurdity. These are not accidents. They are deliberate jokes tied to Sheogorath, the Daedric Prince of Madness, whose obsession with cheese has become one of the series' longest-running gags. Each wheel you find in a strange place feels like another whisper from the developers, reminding you that Skyrim never takes itself too seriously. Dark humor thrives in unexpected corners. In Eastmarch, you may find a skeleton collapsed in front of a collapsed wall of ice, pickaxe still in hand. The tragic irony is clear. The miner dug too far, only to be crushed by the very thing they pursued. In another cave, a body lies on a pressure plate with arrows embedded in the wall nearby, a perfect visual joke about traps and carelessness. These moments turn failure into entertainment, proving that not all deaths are equal. Some are staged for laughter as much as for lore. And then there are the moments of sheer mystery. In the swamps of Hjalmarch, you might encounter bones nailed to trees, arranged in grotesque displays. No quest explains them, no NPC mentions them. They exist solely as fragments of cruelty, whispers of forgotten rituals. The ambiguity is haunting. Skyrim often leaves questions unanswered, trusting the player's imagination to fill the void. That silence is part of its magic. Sometimes what you don't know is scarier than what you do. Underwater, the mysteries deepen. A drowned warrior sits enthroned at the bottom of a lake, sword in hand, like a forgotten king. Elsewhere, a skeleton is chained to an anchor, suggesting murder rather than accident. These scenes transform swimming into archaeology, turning bodies of water into crypts of forgotten stories. They are chilling not because they are explained, but because they are not. All these details, tragic, humorous, absurd, or terrifying, combine to create a world that feels alive even in its stillness. Skyrim is not just about dragons or destiny, it is about the skeleton who died with a lockpick in hand, the goat that climbed higher than logic allows, the miner who was inches from treasure, and the sweet roll that appears where it has no reason to be. These are the details that transform Tamriel from a game into a living legend. They are not marked on your map. They are not tied to objectives. They are simply there, waiting for those who are curious enough to see. That is the beauty of Skyrim's design. It trusts the player to wander, to notice, to laugh, to shiver. Each Easter egg is like a private joke or a quiet tragedy left by the developers, waiting patiently in caves, ruins, and frozen lakes. And when you stumble on one, it feels less like finding a collectible and more like uncovering a secret meant just for you. That intimacy is what makes Skyrim's hidden stories endure, long after the dragons have been slain and the main quest forgotten. What makes Skyrim's hidden details so unforgettable is the way they transform silence into story. You can enter a cave with no quest marker, no dialogue, and no hint of importance, yet emerge with a memory that stays with you longer than any scripted cutscene. These discoveries are not about loot or progression. They are about connection. Each one feels like a direct message from the developers to the player, proof that the world was designed with care for those who take the time to look. In this way, Skyrim becomes more than a fantasy setting. It becomes a living museum of humor, tragedy, and myth waiting to be uncovered. One of the most iconic examples lies beneath the frozen ground near Whiterun. There, players can find a mammoth carcass suspended impossibly in the air, hovering as though caught by invisible magic. At first glance, it feels like a glitch, yet its consistent placement across playthroughs makes many interpret it as intentional, a wink from the developers about Skyrim's unpredictable physics. Instead of breaking immersion, it deepens it, transforming a bug into an Easter egg. This blending of chaos and design is part of what makes Skyrim so unique. Elsewhere, the humor leans darker. In a cave tucked away in the rift, a skeleton lies pinned beneath a collapsed wooden beam, alchemy equipment scattered around it. The implication is immediate. The alchemist's obsession with experiments ended with the roof coming down. The way the skeleton's arm reaches toward its potions makes the scene comical and tragic at once, as though the character's final thought was still about their work. Skyrim excels at this kind of storytelling, where death is not just an endpoint but a punchline, a miniature drama frozen in place. Pop culture references enrich these discoveries further. On a snowy slope, a skeleton dangles upside down, a sword lying just out of reach. For film fans, the homage to The Empire Strikes Back is unmistakable. Luke Skywalker's desperate struggle in the Wampa's lair is echoed here in Bones and Snow, blending Tamrielic tragedy with cinematic history. Skyrim never shouts about these references. They are tucked away in corners where only the curious will find them. That subtlety is what makes the recognition so rewarding. The game also pays homage to its own history. Throughout Skyrim, scattered books reference the events of Morrowind and Oblivion. To new players, they may read like obscure history lessons. To veterans, they are Easter eggs, threads connecting years of Elder Scrolls storytelling into one continuous tapestry. A mention of the Nerevarine here, a reference to the fall of the Septim Dynasty there. Each small detail roots Skyrim in a larger world, reminding fans that their adventures are part of something much greater. Environmental humor plays a huge role too. Bandit camps often hide bizarre arrangements, such as skeletons seated at tables with tankards in hand, frozen mid-toast. In one cave, a skeleton clutches a copy of the lusty Argonian Maid, the infamous in-game play that has appeared across multiple Elder Scrolls titles. Its presence is both absurd and deliberate, a parody of pulp literature and a long-running inside joke for fans. Finding it tucked under a corpse's arm makes it even funnier, as if the poor soul died in the middle of indulgence. The wilderness is equally rich in visual storytelling. In Eastmarch, a skeleton lies buried beneath a collapsed wall of ice, pickaxe still gripped tightly in its hand. The image is a cautionary tale. The miners' greed brought the mountain down upon them. In another area, a skeleton clings desperately to the edge of a cliff, fingers frozen around a vein of ore. The tragic humor is unmistakable, so close, yet so far. These discoveries work as miniature fables, transforming simple bones into timeless lessons about ambition, greed, and the cruelty of nature. Skyrim also celebrates absurdity. In one cave, cheese wheels cascade downstairs as though deliberately placed to roll into the player's path. In another, an enormous pile of cheese fills an entire room, with a skeleton buried beneath it. These moments are hilarious, but they also tie into the series' long-running obsession with Sheogorath, the Daedric Prince of Madness. His love of cheese has become one of the most enduring inside jokes in Elder Scrolls history, and Skyrim embraces it wholeheartedly. Each wheel becomes a symbol not only of madness, but of continuity across games. Sometimes the humor turns inward, poking fun at players directly. Lockpicking, a skill notorious for frustrating adventurers, is mocked through skeletons collapsed in front of locked doors, broken picks scattered across the ground. The scene feels like a mirror of every failed attempt, every reload. It is as though the developers are laughing with the player, immortalizing the struggle in bone and wood. These jokes are not cruel. They are affectionate reminders that the world itself is aware of your habits. There are moments designed to unsettle as well. In the swamps of Hjalmarch, bones are nailed to trees in grotesque displays. No quest explains them, and no dialogue references them. Their silence is what makes them terrifying. They exist only as whispers of cruelty, proof that Skyrim is not just a land of dragons and heroes, but of horror hidden in forgotten places. In another swamp, a circle of bones lies around a burning brazier, evoking rituals never explained. These scenes are chilling precisely because they are left unanswered, allowing the imagination to fill in the blanks. Underwater, more secrets lie waiting. A drowned warrior sits enthroned at the bottom of a lake, sword still in hand, as though claiming a kingdom beneath the waves. In another river, a skeleton is chained to an anchor, suggesting execution rather than accident. These underwater discoveries transform exploration into archaeology, each dive revealing fragments of forgotten tragedies. They remind players that Skyrim's history is layered everywhere, not just in its castles and ruins, but in its lakes and rivers as well. Even the stars above hold meaning. Skyrim's night sky is not random. It echoes constellations from earlier Elder Scrolls games, tying into the birth signs that once shaped character creation. For longtime fans, looking up at the heavens is itself an Easter egg, a reminder that the lore spans not just landscapes, but the very cosmos. The sky becomes another layer of continuity, a celestial reminder of the series' interconnected history. Ultimately, what makes all these discoveries powerful is their subtlety. They are not highlighted, not shouted, not forced. They exist quietly, waiting for those who care enough to notice. Some will make you laugh, a skeleton dying with cheese in hand, a goat perched on a cliff. Others will chill you, a ritual circle of bones, a corpse frozen mid-reach. Together they create a second Skyrim beneath the first, a hidden world of humor, horror, and history layered into every corner. Exploration becomes less about efficiency and more about wonder. You are not just looting dungeons or slaying dragons. You are piecing together stories told through silence. Each Easter egg is a secret conversation, a bond between developer and player. And that is why Skyrim continues to endure. The dragons may be slain, the quests completed, but the mysteries remain, waiting quietly in caves, mountains, and rivers for the curious to uncover. The longer you spend wandering Skyrim, the clearer it becomes that its true magic lies not just in dragons or quests, but in the details scattered like breadcrumbs across the land. These details are often small, an overturned cart, a skeleton with an odd pose, a misplaced book, but they carry immense weight. They make the world feel lived in, as though countless lives were lived and lost long before the Dragonborn's arrival. Each discovery feels like a reward, not for skill, but for curiosity. It is this design philosophy that keeps players exploring Skyrim more than a decade after its release, each new playthrough revealing secrets missed before. Consider the strange shrines that dot the wilderness. In caves or ruins, you may stumble upon makeshift altars built of bones, with candles still burning around them. No quest sends you there. No character ever mentions them. They exist purely as unsettling fragments of forgotten cult activity. The ambiguity is haunting. Were these shrines dedicated to Daedric Princes, to long-dead gods, or to something darker still? The lack of explanation is the point. It invites the imagination to fill in the blanks, leaving you with a lingering unease long after you leave the cave. In other places, the developers let humor take center stage. A skeleton slumped in a chair with a cheese wheel in its lap is a perfect example. The absurdity of dying mid-bite on a piece of cheese is both ridiculous and oddly fitting for Skyrim, a game where Sheogorath's madness touches the world in subtle ways. Another skeleton is found face down in a bowl, as though it had decided to eat itself, a grotesque joke that pushes the boundary of dark humor. These moments are not grand or world-changing, but they stick with you because of their sheer strangeness. Skyrim also has a way of turning accidents into legend. Take the infamous cabbage carts scattered across the land, often overturned with vegetables spilling everywhere. These carts have become symbols of the game's quirky physics. They serve no narrative purpose, but their recurrence makes them feel like inside jokes between player and developer. It is as though the world itself is laughing at its own chaos, and players are invited to laugh along. Other secrets lean heavily on myth. Deep in the mountains, a skeletal hand reaches up from beneath the snow, still gripping a sword. It immediately calls to mind tales of cursed treasure and doomed adventurers who sought glory in harsh places. The placement is deliberate, echoing not just Arthurian legend, but Skyrim's own theme of ambition leading to downfall. You don't need an NPC to explain it. The story is written in the bones, waiting for you to interpret. Pop culture finds its way in as well. In a remote corner, skeletons sit around a table with dice scattered across the surface. The scene is a clear nod to tabletop role-playing games, the very tradition that gave birth to Elder Scrolls. The humor is meta, acknowledging the roots of fantasy gaming while turning skeletons into eternal adventurers frozen mid-session. It's clever, funny, and oddly touching, a tribute to the players who roll dice at their own tables, imagining adventures not so different from Skyrim's. The underwater spaces of Skyrim add another layer of mystery. Dive into certain lakes and rivers, and you may find a skeleton chained to an anchor, its body forever bound beneath the surface. Unlike many Easter eggs that feel humorous, this one is chilling, a silent story of execution or betrayal. In another body of water, a drowned warrior sits enthroned, sword in hand, as though ruling a kingdom of the dead beneath the waves. These discoveries transform Skyrim's waters into haunted spaces, each dive revealing a fragment of untold history. Dwemer ruins, of course, are some of the richest locations for hidden stories. Among the gears and broken machines, skeletons are often arranged in strange, almost human poses. One collapsed automaton lies sprawled across a table with a book nearby, as though it had been studying. Another sits slumped in a chair, its lifeless metal body eerily mimicking human rest. These images blur the line between life and machine, adding to the mystery of the Dwemer's disappearance. The fact that these details are not tied to quests makes them even more powerful. They exist only for the observant. Sometimes humor comes in the form of animals. In the snowy peaks, goats stand perched on impossible ledges, balanced in places no creature should reach. These absurd placements feel intentional, a joke acknowledging Skyrim's unpredictable wildlife AI. Wolves, too, sometimes appear curled beside skeletons, as though choosing companionship in death. These scenes add warmth and poignancy, turning ordinary creatures into storytellers. The developers also enjoyed poking fun at players directly. Lockpicking, often a source of frustration, is mocked through skeletons collapsed in front of locked doors, their broken picks scattered across the ground. It's a sly jab at the countless reloads and wasted attempts players endure. These moments remind you that Skyrim is not just a game you play, it's a game that plays with you. Sweet rolls, the longest-running joke in Elder Scrolls, make their presence known everywhere. In one overturned wagon, dozens of them spill across the ground, transforming a minor prop into a comedic centerpiece. Guards constantly reference stolen sweet rolls, and seeing them physically scattered in the world ties the humor together. It's a gag that transcends Skyrim itself, connecting it to earlier games and rewarding fans who have followed the series for years. Sometimes, the game shifts back to horror without warning. In the swamps near Morthal, Bones are nailed to trees, arranged in grotesque displays. No quest explains who placed them or why. The silence is what makes it terrifying. It feels like stumbling into the aftermath of a ritual best left forgotten. These discoveries are not about treasure or combat. They are about atmosphere, proof that Skyrim is not just epic fantasy, but survival horror in places where the imagination runs wild. Even the stars above are layered with meaning. Skyrim's constellations mirror those of earlier Elder Scrolls games, tying into the birth signs that once shaped character creation. Looking up at the night sky is itself an Easter egg, connecting Tamriel's lore across decades of storytelling. It's subtle, easy to miss, but for those who recognize it, the stars themselves become part of the series' continuity. All of these details, cheese wheels, skeletons, shrines, drowned warriors, add up to something greater than the sum of their parts. They transform Skyrim from a collection of quests into a living, breathing land. They make you laugh, they unsettle you, they spark your imagination. Most importantly, they remind you that the world does not revolve around the Dragonborn. It has its own stories, its own tragedies, its own jokes, all playing out in silence until you stumble upon them. That is why exploration in Skyrim feels endlessly rewarding. It is not about finishing quests or collecting loot. It is about listening to the world itself, about noticing the skeleton clutching a sweet roll or the goat perched impossibly high. Each Easter egg is a conversation across time, a reminder that the developers built this world not just as a stage for battles, but as a place filled with secrets waiting to be found. The greatest strength of Skyrim's design is not its main story, but the silent dramas it scatters across the landscape. Every mountain trail, every abandoned shack, every flooded cave seems to contain a frozen scene that whispers to the player without ever speaking aloud. These scenes, whether humorous, chilling, or profoundly sad, are what transform Tamriel from a stage for quests into a place that feels alive. By studying them, you begin to realize that the game is a tapestry of human folly, ambition, tragedy, and laughter stitched together in bones, books, and broken objects. Take, for instance, the oddities hidden in ordinary homes. In one cabin deep in the rift, shelves are lined not with food or valuables, but with dozens upon dozens of tankards. The obsessive collection of mugs serves no practical purpose, but it tells a story. Someone here had a fixation so powerful it defined their life. Whether it was madness or simple quirk, the result is absurd, and it turns an otherwise unremarkable home into a memorable discovery. The humor works because it mirrors the players themselves, many of whom hoard cheese wheels or iron daggers until their inventory bursts. Elsewhere, the humor becomes darker. Skeletons are arranged in bizarre positions that blur the line between comedy and horror. A skeleton stuck headfirst in a barrel with its legs sticking out feels like slapstick. Another collapsed across an alchemy table surrounded by shattered potions tells of ambition gone disastrously wrong. These frozen stories remind the player that ambition is a theme, not only for heroes and villains, but for nameless souls who met their ends long before you arrived. Some of the most powerful Easter eggs reference real-world myths. In a quiet lake, a skeletal hand clutches a sword that protrudes from the water, a grim parody of the Arthurian legend of Excalibur. But instead of a mystical lady of the lake, Skyrim offers a corpse, turning a tale of destiny into one of mortality. It is both a joke and a tragedy, encapsulating the game's ability to honor myth while grounding it in Tamriel's harsh reality. Humor and tragedy mingle again in the infamous Cheese Shrine. Hidden in a forest clearing, a massive wheel of cheese sits on a pedestal, surrounded by offerings. This absurd sight is a nod to the long-running obsession with cheese in Elder Scrolls fandom. But beneath the joke lies something deeper. Even in parody, Skyrim treats objects as sacred, capable of inspiring reverence or ridicule depending on context. It is both ridiculous and brilliant, rewarding players who explore with a laugh they won't forget. Other moments highlight cruelty and despair. In the swamps of Hjalmarch, a skeleton nailed to a tree with crude bindings creates one of the most disturbing silent stories in the game. No journal explains it, no NPC acknowledges it. It simply exists, a frozen image of brutality. Was it a sacrifice, a punishment, an act of cruelty by bandits or cultists? The lack of answers is what makes it powerful. forcing the player to imagine the horror that unfolded here. Pop culture references also slip into these quiet corners. In one snowy cave, a skeleton dangles upside down from the ceiling, its sword lying just out of reach. The tableau unmistakably mirrors a scene from a beloved science fiction film, transforming Tamriel into a place where even cinema echoes faintly. Players who recognize it laugh at the absurdity, while others simply register it as another strange accident. It is the ambiguity that makes the Easter egg work. The developers often used environmental storytelling to poke fun at the players themselves. One of the clearest examples is the skeleton collapsed at a locked door, its broken lockpicks scattered across the floor. It is a jab at the frustration every player has felt, breaking lockpick after lockpick before finally giving up. The joke lands because it is universal. It's not just about one character's death, but about the collective experience of everyone who has ever tried to force a lock in Skyrim. Books, too, play their part in this hidden narrative. In various ruins, you can find volumes like The Lusty Argonian Maid, a tongue-in-cheek parody of romance novels that has appeared across multiple Elder Scrolls games. Its recurrence in Skyrim transforms it into a meta-joke, a gift for longtime fans and an absurd surprise for newcomers. Finding a skeleton curled up with this book tucked under its arm is an especially clever gag, blending Tamrielic parody with dark humor about obsession. Sometimes, the world itself becomes the joke. Goats, known for their bizarre ability to scale impossible cliffs, are often found perched on sheer ledges, far above the ground. The placement is so absurd that it feels intentional, as though the developers decided to celebrate the quirks of their own AI. These absurd goats have become a beloved part of Skyrim's identity, memes brought to life through environmental design. But alongside laughter comes horror. In Dwemer ruins, eerie details abound. Among the humming machinery, you may find a skeleton posed as though it had been studying a book, its body slumped eternally over the table. In another room, a broken automaton mimics human posture, its limbs twisted into positions almost too natural to be accidental. These details blur the boundary between man and machine, adding another layer of unease to the mystery of the Dwemer's disappearance. One of the most famous hidden scenes involves a mammoth that has fallen from the sky, crushed upon the landscape with bones scattered around it. The absurdity of the physics glitch turned into legend, embraced by players as if it were an intentional Easter egg. Skyrim's genius lies in allowing even its accidents to become part of its mythology, merging bugs and design into a tapestry of shared stories. Even the night sky holds secrets. The constellations above Tamriel are Easter eggs themselves, connecting back to the character creation systems of earlier games. For those who recognize them, looking up is like looking into the history of the series, a reminder that Skyrim is not just one chapter, but part of a much larger saga. Ultimately, what makes these details unforgettable is not their size, but their intimacy. They are not announced, not explained, not marked by quests. They are left for you to find or miss on your own, and that is why they resonate so strongly. They feel personal, like inside jokes or private tragedies meant only for the most curious wanderers. Skyrim is not just a game about destiny or prophecy. It is a world that rewards those who pause, those who look into barrels, climb impossible cliffs, or dive beneath frozen lakes. Its Easter eggs are the proof that Tamriel is more than a backdrop. It is a living world where even the smallest details tell stories as grand as any dragon fight. What separates Skyrim from most open-world games is the way its smallest corners carry weight equal to its greatest battles. The dragon fights and scripted quests might define the broad strokes of the game, but it is the unmarked discoveries, the hidden bones, the strange shrines, the misplaced objects that give the land its soul. These secrets are never forced upon the player. Instead, they wait silently, like forgotten memories tucked into the mountains, ready to be uncovered only by those who stray from the path. One of the most unsettling examples can be found in the marshes of Yalmarch. There, a circle of bones lies arranged around a tree, lit by burnt-out candles. No quest sends you here, and no NPC ever mentions it. The discovery is entirely optional, and its lack of explanation is exactly what makes it haunting. Was it a cult ritual? A desperate prayer? Or perhaps the site of a forgotten execution? The scene lingers because the absence of answers allows imagination to fill the silence. Skyrim thrives in these moments where suggestion is more powerful than clarity, but the game also loves to laugh at itself. In one ruined cabin, a skeleton sits slumped against a door, several broken lockpicks scattered at its feet. Any player who has fought with Skyrim's infamous lockpicking system immediately understands the joke. It is not just the story of one unlucky adventurer, but a playful mirror held up to the player's own frustration. This is the essence of Skyrim's humor. Jokes written into the world itself, shared between developers and players across time. Some secrets lean heavily on myth. Near a frozen lake, you can find the skeletal hand of a long-dead adventurer reaching from the ice, clutching the hilt of a sword. It is a deliberate echo of the Arthurian Excalibur legend, but twisted through Skyrim's lens of mortality. Instead of a chosen hero rising with destiny, you find only a corpse consumed by the elements. It is dark, ironic, and strangely beautiful, a reminder that Skyrim transforms even the most familiar myths into its own brutal stories. Other finds border on the absurd. In a forest clearing, a massive wheel of cheese rests atop a crude pedestal, surrounded by candles like an object of worship. Cheese has long been a running gag throughout Elder Scrolls, tied to the mad god Sheogorath. But here, it feels elevated to divine parody, a shrine to absurdity, left for players to stumble upon and laugh at. It is a reward not of gold or weapons, but of shared humor between those who crafted the world and those exploring it. The developers also love to immortalize failure. In one cavern, a skeleton lies sprawled across a chest, one hand outstretched as though death came just before they could claim their treasure. The cruel irony is that the chest is empty, making the entire scene an elaborate joke at the expense of greed. Skyrim excels at this kind of environmental punchline, where placement alone tells a complete story. No dialogue, no quest, just bones and irony. Pop culture nods are scattered throughout, blurring Tamriel with Earth's own storytelling. In one icy cave, a skeleton hangs upside down from the ceiling, a sword lying just beyond reach. Fans of classic science fiction instantly recognize the homage to a famous scene in The Empire Strikes Back. For those who do not, the discovery still works as a strange accident of the world. This duality, rewarding both those who know the reference and those who don't, is what makes Skyrim's Easter eggs so effective. Some of the most striking details are found underwater. In one lake, a skeleton sits chained to a rock, its empty eye sockets staring eternally upward. The deliberate placement suggests an execution, a punishment carried out beneath the waves. Unlike other drowned corpses that imply accidents, this one is unmistakably grim. It turns a simple dive into a chilling reminder that Tamriel's cruelties are not confined to dragons and Draugr. They come from people as well. Humor returns in unexpected places. In the mountains, goats stand on ledges so impossibly high that it seems like a bug in the physics system. Yet their consistent placement suggests intent, as though the developers wanted to celebrate the absurdity of their own AI. These goats became legendary among players, transformed into living memes. They serve as proof that Skyrim's identity is as much about its quirks as its quests. The Dwemer ruins, already eerie, hold some of the strangest tableau. In one, a broken automaton is slumped over a table as though studying a book, its metallic limbs twisted into a disturbingly human posture. In another, skeletal remains are surrounded by inactive machines, the scene staged to look like a final stand against overwhelming odds. These quiet arrangements blur the line between history and performance art, deepening the mystery of a vanished civilization. Books are another thread through these Easter eggs. Volumes like The Lusty Argonian Maid appear again and again, often tucked into absurd places, beneath a skeleton's arm, on a bedside table in a ruined fort, or piled high in forgotten corners. Their recurrence across multiple Elder Scrolls games transforms them into artifacts of comedy, rewarding longtime fans while confusing new players who stumble on them without context. The humor is layered, building across years of the franchise. Even the physics of the world have become legend. The infamous falling mammoth, crashing inexplicably from the sky, is not just a glitch, but an Easter egg in its own right. It became a symbol of Skyrim's unpredictable magic, embraced by players as though it were intentional. Few games could transform accidents into myth, but Skyrim does it effortlessly, allowing its flaws to become part of its charm. The night sky hides its own secrets. Constellations visible above Skyrim are not random but tied to the character creation systems of earlier games. For those who recognize them, it is like looking up into the history of the series itself. These small details remind players that Skyrim is not isolated, but part of a living continuum that stretches across decades of Elder Scrolls lore. The brilliance of these discoveries lies in their restraint. They are not highlighted by quest markers or rewards. They do not announce themselves. They wait quietly, rewarding only those who choose to look. And because of this, they feel personal. Stumbling upon a skeleton pinned to a wall by an arrow, or a goat perched on a cliff, or a shrine of cheese feels like your secret, a story written for you alone. In the end, Skyrim's Easter eggs teach a subtle lesson that the greatest stories are not always the scripted ones. They are the accidents, the jokes, the tragedies left behind for someone curious enough to stop, to wander, to see. The land is alive because it is littered with these secrets, each one proof that Tamriel is more than just a backdrop for quests. It is a world in which every rock, ruin, and river holds a story waiting quietly for discovery. What makes Skyrim unforgettable is not only its sweeping mountains or the dragons that cut across its skies, but the smaller stories hidden where players least expect them. These Easter eggs exist like fingerprints of the developers, touches of humor, tragedy, and myth woven into the tapestry of Tamriel. They remind us that Skyrim's landscape is alive not just with quests, but with whispers of forgotten lives, jokes left behind, and stories told only through silence. One striking discovery lies in the volcanic tundra near Eastmarch. There, the burnt skeleton of an unfortunate adventurer rests in the middle of a blackened crater, surrounded by scattered mining tools. The position of the body, half-seated as though resting when fire consumed him, turns tragedy into absurdity. It feels like a grim parody of the dangers of Skyrim itself, where even the earth can erupt and swallow the careless whole. No dialogue, no quest, only a moment of dark comedy that lingers in the imagination. Equally haunting is the discovery of a drowned skeleton chained to an anchor at the bottom of a lake. Unlike the scattered corpses that suggest accidents, this one feels deliberate. The careful placement tells a story of betrayal, punishment, or execution carried out far from the eyes of others. Diving down into the cold water, only to find this silent tableau, transforms a routine swim into a chilling reminder that Tamriel's cruelties are as human as they are monstrous. Not all secrets unsettle. Many lean into the absurd. In one clearing, a shrine built entirely of cheese wheels sits atop a crude pedestal, surrounded by candles. The sight is surreal, as if Sheogorath himself had demanded worship through dairy offerings. It is a perfect example of Skyrim's humor, a joke hidden in plain sight, waiting to reward the curious. The absurdity of cheese elevated to sacred relic transforms the wilderness into a parody of ritual itself. The developers also love to poke fun at the frustrations of adventuring. In one ruined cabin, a skeleton lies sprawled across the floor, broken lockpicks scattered around its fingers. Anyone who is cursed at Skyrim's lockpicking minigame immediately understands the joke. It is not just a death scene, it is a mirror, showing players that they too have failed here countless times. By embedding these frustrations into the world itself, the developers created a conversation across time between player and game. Some secrets reach beyond Tamriel, nodding to stories from our own world. Deep in a snowy cavern, a skeleton dangles upside down from the ceiling, its sword just out of reach. Fans of The Empire Strikes Back immediately recognize the echo of Luke Skywalker trapped in the Wampa's lair. For others, it is simply a strange scene, still compelling in its absurdity. Skyrim thrives in these dual layers, rewarding recognition, but never excluding those who simply stumble upon strangeness. Other references lean into the foundations of fantasy itself. In a ruined tower, 3 skeletons sit around a table covered in dice and parchment, clearly arranged as if caught mid-session of a tabletop role-playing game. It is an obvious nod to the genre's roots, a wink from the developers to the traditions that birthed the Elder Scrolls. To see skeletons locked in eternal play, surrounded by the detritus of adventure, is both eerie and hilarious. The natural world is just as much a stage for Skyrim's secrets. Goats can often be found perched on impossibly high ledges, staring down as if mocking the laws of gravity. Though many assume these placements are glitches, their consistency suggests otherwise. They are developer jokes immortalized in goat form. These animals became icons of Skyrim's strange humor, transforming bugs into deliberate comedy. Water hides its own mysteries. At the bottom of a frigid lake near Windhelm, a skeleton sits slumped upon a throne, clad in rusted armor and still gripping a sword. There is no explanation, no quest. It simply exists, as if a forgotten king decided to rule from the depths. The sight is absurd and eerie, equal parts parody and tragedy, reminding players that even the most desolate places are rich with stories. Dwemer ruins, already alien, contain their share of staged oddities. In one chamber, a broken automaton lies sprawled across a desk, a book still open in front of it. The absurdity of a machine studying is both comic and unsettling. It blurs the line between man and construct, turning technology into a parody of humanity. Elsewhere, human skeletons are arranged alongside deactivated machines, hinting at desperate final battles no one survived to tell. These details transform ruins into haunted theaters of history. The literary tradition of Easter eggs runs strong too. The lusty Argonian maid makes its inevitable appearance in Skyrim, tucked into unlikely places, under a skeleton's arm, in a ruined inn, or scattered across a bandit hideout. Its presence is a long-running gag, one that rewards veterans of the series and baffles newcomers. Finding the same absurd play across multiple games turns it into an inside joke, a continuity of laughter spanning decades. But humor is not the only lesson. In a snowy pass near the throat of the world, you might find the skeletal remains of a miner, pickaxe still in hand, crushed beneath the rocks he was excavating. The scene is simple, but devastating. It tells of greed, punished by the very earth itself. The environment becomes a storyteller, using only bones and stone to speak. Pop culture references resurface in unlikely corners. Near a ruined camp, skeletons are arranged around a fire in a pose strikingly similar to the Fellowship of the Ring's iconic resting scene. Whether intentional or coincidental, the resemblance is uncanny. It transforms bones into parody, linking Tamriel's adventures to those of Middle-earth. Skyrim excels at this blending of worlds, collapsing the boundary between fantasy universes into playful homages. Even sound is used as an Easter egg. In Dwemer ruins, faint echoes sometimes resemble whispers or voices. No enemies are present, no characters speak, yet the effect lingers, creating unease. Was it intentional design, or the imagination of players heightened by eerie ambiance? It hardly matters. For those who hear it, the experience becomes an Easter egg of the mind, a secret not placed in the world, but in perception itself. And then there are the quiet shrines. In one forest clearing near Solitude, a circle of stones stands in ritual formation, moss covering their surfaces. No quest explains it, and no lore mentions it. It exists as a question, a fragment of history lost to time. Players who stumble upon it are left to imagine what ceremonies might once have taken place. In that silence lies its power, mystery without resolution. What unites all these discoveries is their subtlety. They are not rewards for quests, nor do they grant riches. Instead, they reward curiosity, humor, and wonder. They make Skyrim's world feel vast and lived in, filled with stories that do not need explaining. Each skeleton, each misplaced cheese wheel, each shrine to forgotten gods becomes a conversation between developer and explorer, proving that the greatest treasures of Skyrim are not gold or weapons, but secrets waiting quietly in the wilderness. The beauty of Skyrim's hidden details is not simply in what they reveal, but in how they transform the way players experience the land. Beneath the sweeping battles with dragons and the monumental quests that shape Tamriel's destiny lies a quieter tapestry woven from secrets. These Easter eggs, ranging from absurd to tragic, from mythic to playful, make Skyrim feel like a world that breathes even when the player is not looking. They are small stories etched into caves, ruins, lakes, and mountaintops, waiting for those who dare to wander off the beaten path. One of the most surreal discoveries sits high in the mountain ranges. A skeleton lies half buried in ice, frozen mid-pose with arms outstretched toward the sky. No loot lies nearby. No notes explain its fate. It simply exists, a silent cry frozen in time. The image sparks countless interpretations. Perhaps it was a worshipper reaching for the heavens, or an unlucky traveler caught in a storm. Its ambiguity is what makes it haunting, forcing players to imagine the final moments of a life now reduced to bones. Elsewhere, humor takes the stage. Deep in the rift, a small cabin is filled wall to wall with tankards, dozens stacked in haphazard piles. The absurdity is undeniable. Who lived here? What obsession drove them to hoard only mugs, ignoring food or tools? The scene tells a story without words, a person consumed by strange compulsions until the end. It is silly, yes, but also deeply human, a reminder that even in fantasy worlds, quirks define lives. Some discoveries lean on mythology. In a secluded lake, a skeletal hand emerges from the water, clutching a rusted sword. It is an obvious echo of the Excalibur legend, but twisted by Skyrim's darker tone. Instead of a mystical gift from the Lady of the Lake, it is the desperate grasp of someone who drowned while trying to claim glory. What was once myth becomes tragedy. Skyrim thrives on these reinterpretations, blending the familiar with the grim reality of its cold landscapes. Pop culture references add another layer of delight. In one icy cavern, a skeleton hangs upside down, a sword just out of reach. Fans immediately recognize the homage to The Empire Strikes Back, while others simply find the image unsettling. By planting such references, the developers acknowledge the world beyond Tamriel, rewarding recognition while still crafting a scene that works on its own. It is this balance between homage and originality that makes Skyrim's secrets timeless. Even sound design plays a role in storytelling. In Dwemer ruins, faint echoes sometimes mimic whispers, though no characters are present. For players exploring alone, the effect is unnerving, as though the ghosts of the Dwemer themselves linger in the halls. Whether intentional or a trick of acoustics, it becomes an auditory Easter egg, adding mystery where nothing is seen. Skyrim does not just hide secrets in objects or bones, it hides them in silence and sound. Not all secrets are frightening or somber. Some are pure comedy. On a snowy ridge, a goat stands balanced on a ledge so narrow it seems impossible. The placement feels deliberate, a wink from the developers about the absurdity of Skyrim's wildlife physics. These goats became legendary, a reminder that even glitches can become part of the charm. It is humor born of chaos, the kind of memory that players share and laugh about for years. One of the most iconic discoveries lies in the wilderness near Whiterun. A circle of stones stands arranged like a ritual site, burnt corpses scattered around it. In the center rests a unique weapon, left behind as if it were the prize of a failed ceremony. No quest points here, no lore explains it. The unanswered questions make it powerful. Was it a cult, a magical experiment gone wrong? The mystery is stronger than any explanation could be. The developers also took pleasure in poking fun at players directly. In one ruin, a skeleton lies sprawled in front of a locked chest, broken lockpicks scattered around. Anyone who has struggled with Skyrim's lockpicking minigame feels the sting of recognition. It is as if the game is laughing with you, acknowledging your frustration. These moments bridge the gap between world and player, turning environmental storytelling into a conversation across time. Perhaps the most poignant secrets are those that blur the line between life and art. In a ruined tavern, a skeleton sits at a table with a lute still clutched in its hands. The image suggests that even in their final moments, this bard chose to sing rather than despair. It is tragic, yes, but also beautiful. Skyrim excels at such dualities, finding light in the dark, humor in tragedy, and meaning in silence. What ties all of these discoveries together is their subtlety. They are not marked on maps, not rewarded with riches. They exist for the curious, for those who explore for exploration's sake. Each Easter egg, whether a shrine to cheese, a skeleton nailed to a trap, or a drowned king on an underwater throne, reinforces the sense that Skyrim is alive with stories. The developers were not only building a game, but a world layered with humor, horror, and history. It is this density of detail that explains Skyrim's enduring legacy. More than a decade after its release, players still stumble upon new secrets. A skeleton arranged in an odd pose, a book tucked into a forgotten corner, a goat perched on a peak. These are not accidents. They are deliberate touches that transform Tamriel into a land that feels infinite. Skyrim is not just a setting for quests, it is a canvas of hidden stories that reward patience, curiosity, and imagination. Every Easter egg is like a secret handshake between the developers and the players, a reminder that behind the vastness of the game lies a human touch, a team of creators who wanted to surprise, delight, and unsettle in equal measure. The magic of Skyrim is not only in slaying dragons, but in finding meaning in the smallest of places. A skeleton with a book, a chest with worthless loot, or a shrine built from cheese. These moments prove that Tamriel is more than a fantasy. It is a mirror of the humor, fears, and dreams that shape us all. And now, having uncovered these 117 facts about Skyrim's hidden wonders, it is clear why this game remains a masterpiece of exploration. Every corner holds a story, every ruin hides a joke, and every mountain peak carries the promise of discovery. Skyrim endures not because of its main quest alone, but because of the secrets that wait silently for the curious. If you've enjoyed this journey through Skyrim's hidden details, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next adventure. There are always more worlds to explore, more secrets to uncover, and more stories waiting to be told, and I'd love to share them with you.